The Antichrist.
Like it or not, Bible prophecy paints a prominent picture of one of the key characters in human history. The Antichrist. The Antichrist is also called the Lawless One, the Liar, the Beast, the Son of Perdition, the Man of Sin, the Deceiver, Satan incarnate, the boaster talking of his greatness and demanding worship, and the arrogant one speaking conceited and insulting words.
He will be arrogant, for he is the father of lies. He shall speak conceited and insulting words. The lawless one shall exalt himself above all that is called God. This little horn will have a mouth boasting arrogantly.
Let's start by explaining how prophets or psychics were able to foretell. Anyone who has experienced a premonition that came true will probably understand this concept. The prophets were not perfect. Therefore, their prophecies were imperfect. This assertion contradicts the fundamentalist doctrine of prophecy infallibility. But the prophets also agree, their powers were limited and somewhat obscured to a degree, where they could only see partial views of distant times. They only viewed the future through a narrow prism. Or, as the Apostle Paul put it, prophets were seeing through a glass darkly. Also, what they viewed in the future was almost impossible to explain at the time. How could ancient prophets have foretold all Earth's inhabitants viewing events live simultaneously? How could they have described an economic system where a numeric code must be implanted on all humans in order for them to buy or sell? The symbolisms, inscriptions, and parables are metaphoric pictures of things to come. But so are their explicit predictions, some written to be taken literally. Prophecy is a mixed bag. Eschatologists explain how reputable prophets were able to foresee what others could not. The prophet or psychic saw the future as peaks of one mountain range with more distant peaks beyond the first range and so forth, with fading clarity, the more remote the ridge, like staring at distant peaks of the Great Smoky Mountains, each range further away becoming hazier and smokier. The view is like astronomers in the early 20th century only discovering what had appeared to have been stars were actually distant galaxies with hundreds of billions of additional stars each. Prophets did not see these peaks assembled as solitary land masses, and were unable to view the valleys between higher-profile human events. They only caught highlights of history. The peaks and valleys of the prophet's vision is the best way to describe how only the most prominent events or crossroads were foretold, while seldom, if ever, mentioning other less significant periods.
For now we see through a glass, darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known.
American author Sinclair Lewis predicted the U.S. would eventually fall to fascism, not by a foreign invasion, but by a diabolical force using religion and the sense of patriotism. Lewis was not religious, but an atheist. So were many other great leaders and artists of the past.
When fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. Sinclair Lewis, 1935.
The Antichrist incites violence by telling lies. He plays on resentment, vengeance, and falsehoods to inspire his listeners. Once a movement believes absurdities, its members will be inclined to act on those absurdities by committing violence against the races, religions, or groups they have been indoctrinated to hate. The Antichrist drills that hatred and resentment into them for the purpose of causing division and inciting violence.
Those who believe absurdities will soon commit atrocities. François Marie Voltaire, 1694 through 1778.
The Crusades, Inquisition, 9/11, and witch burnings should have taught the world that fanatical religion kills. The Antichrist will play on religious conviction to bring about conflict and violence. He doesn't believe in Christianity, but uses it to further his evil agenda. His religious followers fall for his deception.
Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction. Blaise Pascal Pensies, 1623 through 1662.
Most dictators use the excuse of a foreign attack or a feared enemy to consolidate power. The Antichrist is no exception. Thus, will he use war to accumulate power? False flag operations have always been used to propagandize the people to war, which, in turn, opens the door to tyranny.
If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. James Madison.
The Antichrist will purposely divide races, nations, and people. Then, after cultivating conflict, he will set out to conquer. He will be given power to provoke unrest all around the globe and will cause people to turn on each other. After rioting and clashing with one another, the masses will descend to murder and massacre. The Antichrist incites violence, then stands back to enjoy it. He sets fires, but doesn't put them out. The Antichrist is an arsonist who gains heinous pleasure from fires he ignites. But most importantly, he will be given a large sword. The large sword is a lethal weapon few nations possess, and no nations own this particularly large sword of such quality and quantity. The weapon is what distinguishes the Antichrist and gives him power over other nations, not to downplay the evil invisible underworld force empowering him to push vile vendettas, lies, and hate. The large sword is not earned by the Antichrist. He does nothing to achieve it, neither by accomplishment nor attribute. He is given the weapon. It's handed to him.
Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword.
The Antichrist will be the seducer of nations. He will be the master of deception. And then, after taking power, he will attack an unnamed nation unexpectedly, without warning. Many millions will be killed as a consequence of his unilateral decision.
He will be a master of deception and will become arrogant. He will destroy many without warning. Daniel 8:25.
Jesus forewarned that the super-religious, self-righteous Pharisees would reject him. But, he said, they would accept a false Messiah at a future time who would come in his own name.
I am come in my Father's name, and ye receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him ye will receive.
After the dust slightly settles from conflicts stirred by the Antichrist, the world's population is lured into the assumption war is averted. A sense of denial sets in.
For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
The compromised church will fall for his deception. They will believe his every lie. Not because they are gullible, but because they have a desire to believe lies and deny truths. They will be delusional.
For this reason God sends them a powerful delusion, so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness.
The Antichrist will be the master of deceit. He will disguise himself to be Christian despite not being one. He does this to gain their support, for, without them, the Antichrist would never be able to take power.
No wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Therefore it is not surprising if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness, whose end will be according to their deeds. 2 Corinthians 11:14-15.
There's a reason dozens of prophetic passages warn that people should not be deceived by false prophets and the Antichrist himself. If this subject was not so important, prophecies would not have warned about deception in so many passages, leading up to the advent of the lawless one.
And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. For there shall arise false Christs, and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect.
Despite these warnings in prophecy, many Christians will fall prey to deception. And the reason they succumb to the dark side is because Christians of that time will forget the teachings of Christ not to lay up treasures on earth for themselves. Their focus will not be on feeding the hungry, caring for the sick, or taking care of the needy. But it will be upon accumulating more wealth and material goods. In brief, they will scoff at the sick and look down on the poor, opposite to what Christ taught. In other words, they will perform as anti-Christians, or antichrists. Yielding to evil stems from their susceptibility, which is acquired by veering from Christ's core teachings. This is the period prophecy describes as the Great Falling Away. It comes before what is called the Great Tribulation.
Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
The famous man, whom the fallen church follows, will speak arrogantly, use vile language, and will boast that he's the greatest. His first term lasts just 3½ years. Nevertheless, the fallen church enthusiastically supports the Antichrist, despite all the warnings in their own holy book.
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months.
The Antichrist performs miracles. At least, they seem like miracles to the captivated crowd. He makes fire flash down to earth while everyone is watching. Did you catch this? Quote, while everyone was watching. When the book of Revelation was written in the 1st century, there was no television, no satellites, no wireless. Only smoke signals and young couriers racing between Mediterranean villages. The prophecy is clear. The whole world watches the Antichrist's fiery displays, flashes of fury, and utter destruction of enemies.
But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces. And the God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things.
Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar was one of the foreshadows of the Antichrist, as were Nero, Napoleon, and Hitler. Nebuchadnezzar erected a golden statue of himself 60 cubits tall and 6 cubits wide, which was a foreshadowing of the Antichrist's 666. In fact, the ancient king ordered most everything to be decorated with gold. Prophecies are clear that the Babylonian king was declaring himself to be a god, thus demanding worship. But the worship was to be directed at the statue he had erected. The ancient king's statue didn't move, But the Antichrist's image moves and speaks, probably indicating it will be robotic and not simply a piece of art or wax. Even their numbers involved are clues: a statue 60 cubits tall, 6 cubits wide, and was to be worshipped while 6 instruments were played. And we know from the book of Revelation that 666 is the number of the Antichrist. This is the Hebrew parallel poetic style in which the Bible is composed.
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed.
The book of Revelation predicts that the Antichrist, also known as the Beast, will erect an image of himself, and this personal facsimile is one of the most prominent features of the Antichrist's rule, as described in the book of Revelation. And the image will seem to be alive, because it will speak. Will it be a sophisticated robot, superior to one found in a wax museum? Of significance is the fact the image is placed in the city of Babylon. The Antichrist character erects the image in the city which is the prototype for the great city that will emerge at the end of the age, New York City, or the American Babylon. The image is not assembled in Jerusalem, but in the prophetic Babylon, a towering port city on a sea coast. Ancient Babylon was several hundred miles inland and was not on the coast like the one described in the 18th chapter of Revelation.
And now you know what is holding him back, so that he may be revealed at the proper time. For the secret power of lawlessness is already at work, but the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan, displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders, and in every sort of evil that deceives those who are perishing.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Modern-era hypocrites not only compromise biblical principles to gain power, they ignore the prophets. So much of what fake Christians claim in the political arena contradicts the core teachings of Jesus Christ. We saw this firsthand in the 2016 campaign. We saw evangelicals vote 81% for Donald Trump, a known thief, rapist, adulterer, and pathological liar, who has no business in the White House, much less on the world stage. How could this happen? The religious right was seduced by the dark side. But the signs, plus charlatan and con artist characteristics, were so clearly overlooked for the prize of power. They surrendered to a phrase they claimed to despise, situational ethics. They followed a tribal mentality instead of Christ's standards. They not only believed lies, they eagerly devoured them. No one could persuade them they were taking the wrong path. There was, and is, an impenetrable mindset, a delusion. So, the biblical prophecies allow us to see how the religious right was seduced by power and greed. Thus, they brought about the possibility of the fulfillment of many passages, particularly the 17th chapter of the Revelation. The Antichrist is pictured in 3 books in the Bible as arrogant, boastful, and a blatant liar. He is also the one that promises peace in the Middle East, yet breaks his agreement with Israel after 3.5 years. He deceives the apostate church and at the same time many Orthodox Jews. Ancient prophecy articulates, by peace he shall destroy many. But perhaps Mr. Trump's ascension to the presidency spells the end of the USA as a superpower, allowing another strong nation to fill the vacuum, in which case the Antichrist may rise as a consequence of Trump's rise. Either way, we are witnesses to this era of delusion.
He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many.
The Antichrist will also act impulsively, erratically, and without warning. When the world finally assumes he has a measure of stability and respectability, the Antichrist orders a surprise attack on another nation or group of nations.
For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
Prophecies also make clear, the Antichrist will constantly boast about himself. He will speak pompous words. The Antichrist will attempt to change laws and customs. But these new laws and customs will be established to benefit himself only. Then, his pride will spill over into outrageous policy. He will direct all calendars to be changed to reflect his coming to power, in an attempt to erase the designation of Christ's birth over 2,000 years ago.
He will speak against the Most High, and oppress his saints, and try to change the set times and the laws.
The Antichrist rises at the same time nature seems to fall into chaos. The sea and waves roar over coastal cities, prophecy states.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Luke 21:25.
In a time of peace and prosperity, the Antichrist stirs conflict, wars, and instability. As opposed to Hitler's rise, there is no preceding economic downturn that justifies such a high-profile dictator's rise to power. He lies and buys his way to influence, by painting a false, dismal picture of predecessors and past. His followers swallow his dishonesties without question, despite the fact they are front-row witnesses to opposites of what the Antichrist describes. The Antichrist also speaks arrogant and insulting words. He promotes deceit and falsehoods, and in his own mind, he will make himself great. On the other hand, his inclination to use deceit causes him to prosper. In other words, he acquires ill-gotten gain through illicit means, primarily through lying. He's a successful BS artist. 42 months equals 3.5 years. The Antichrist will be authorized to act for that period of time. Then he will be authorized to act for an additional 3.5 years after his first term expires. Authorized by whom? Does this imply democracy? Why 3.5? Why not 4? Does the campaign season cut each term by 6 months? After an unspecified time within this given 7-year period, he revolutionizes the world's economic, law enforcement, and banking systems. All humans are forced to acquire the new system by having a microchip or code implanted in their hands or heads. In effect, identity theft is eliminated. Or so they assume. The new system follows the natural course of convenience. There are no more checkout counters, no cash, no cards, no inconvenience of waiting in lines. The person is simply scanned when leaving the store. Who would not desire such a practical, universal arrangement? The individual's medical, photo ID, personal, employment, criminal, and political records are all stored on the embedded chip. After the new economic system is installed, no persons are allowed to buy, sell, travel, trade, receive medical treatment, or vote without having the chip inserted in their bodies. Think how many trillions of dollars will be saved by eliminating all these unnecessary steps? A cashless, cardless society at last. Think of the convenience of a personally embedded GPS system, where every person on Earth is tracked. No one is ever lost again. Think of how effective law enforcement is, where suspects, convicts, and political enemies are instantly tracked down, arrested, punished, or eliminated, at the determination of the Antichrist's central control. The savings is astounding. The device, or mark, is used to exterminate undesirables, including illegal aliens. Deportation is no problem. Just zap them to death through a tiny microchip in their hand or head. And the beauty is, this is done from a remote data center controlled by the world's #1 autocrat. The international banking system and law enforcement applauds the revolutionary economic scheme. The Antichrist is given much credit for the new system. It is praised that he much craves.
No bag, no keys, no wallet, and no ID. A move of the hand simply opens doors. Welcome to the future, or what is the present for a group of employees at New Fusion near Brussels. Staff members at the marketing and technology company voluntarily agreed to have radio frequency identification chips placed inside their hands. The kits were bought online, and a glass tube about the width of a pencil lead was implanted into their hands.
Now we're installing it for ourselves. We control it from ourselves, but if a government will one day will push it into the market or will push it into their people, it will have downsides as well. So we really need to think about this, how we handle privacy, how we handle security, which data you can put on it.
Dries van Krijn, a New Fusion developer, designed the software which is used with the chip.
Scan your chip and you get your personal information. Your favorite Spotify track gets added to the Office playlist, so your music is combined with the others, so everybody has their their choice. It brings your to-dos, just like a personalized dashboard. That's one of the applications. It was just kind of a showcase to show what can be done in a few hours. So imagine if you have a few months, a few years, what you can build with just that personal identifier.
4 or 5 demos.
It is a technology that in the future could redefine our relationships with businesses. Think of all those cards which you carry with separate chips, whether for banking or transport.
The library, they have their own card. To every retail shop, you get another card. Your banking, you have 3, 4 Visa, MasterCards. It's so many cards. And instead, if we could turn that around and say, all right, no, this is my identity, that they would connect to you instead of the other way around.
It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Revelation 13:16-18.
An assassination attempt is made on the Antichrist. He's inflicted with a wound to the head. Specifically, the wound will be on the right side of his head and arm. His right eye will go blind. But he shall experience what will be perceived as a miraculous recovery. The Antichrist uses the assassination attempt to acquire more power.
And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Revelation 13:3. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye, his arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. Zechariah 11:17.
Al-Masih ad-Dajjal is the name given to the Antichrist by the Islamic faith. He is called the false Messiah, liar, and the deceiver by Muhammad in his writings. According to Muhammad, he is to appear, pretending to the Al-Masih or the Messiah, but will be an impostor. The Arabic name Dajjal is of Syrian origin, whose root is Dajjal, meaning much lie or deception. The Dajjal is an evil being who will seek to impersonate the true Messiah, according to Islamic prophecy. The name Dajjal also is rooted in the Arabic word dajjal, which means to gold plate or to coat in gold. It is derived from the word meaning to mix.
Ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist, is blind in the right eye and his eye looks like a bulging out grape. His eye will be punctured, and his left eye will be raised to his forehead. There will be big mountains of smoke at both front and back sides of his caravan. Muhammad, 6th and 7th centuries AD.
At some point after assuming power, the Antichrist betrays the Church and Orthodox Jews. Their seeming ignorant alliance with the Antichrist causes his rise, but leads to their fall, possibly 3½ years after the signing of the Middle East Peace Treaty.
And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds, and tongues, and nations. Revelation 13:7.
The Antichrist's voice is like that of a dragon. In another passage, his voice is described as that of a roaring lion.
And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Revelation 13:11.
The number one character flaw of the Antichrist is self-glorification. He demands constant worship and adulation from all those around him.
And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Daniel 11:36.
After 3½ years, the Antichrist will break the peace treaty that he will have made with Israel. On one of his visits to Jerusalem, he will walk into the newly constructed Jewish temple and proclaim himself to be God or the Messiah. Israelis will be in shock. The construction of the third temple is not necessary for this prophecy fulfillment, but most likely. Not only does the Antichrist recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, he builds an elaborate embassy in the holy city which he dedicates with great pageantry. He demands praise for his negotiating the peace treaty, then breaks it after the Jewish people refuse to recognize him as their Messiah.
He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7 he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Daniel 9:27.
Other prophetic verses paint a picture of the coming Antichrist.
And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13:12. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Revelation 13:13. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had a wound by a sword, and did live. Revelation 13:14. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea! For the devil is come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he is but a short time. Revelation 12:12. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter 5:8. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance, and understanding dark sentences, shall stand up. Daniel 8:23. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Daniel 11:37. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13:12. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Revelation 13:8. For we struggle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the world of darkness, against the invisible spirits of wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. And they shall believe a lie and be damned. 2 Thessalonians 2:11-12. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. John 8:44. And the Lord will send a plague on all the nations that fought against Jerusalem. Their people will become like walking corpses, their flesh rotting away. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Zechariah 14:12. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Ever learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. 2 Timothy 3:1-7.
The final exhortation to the prophet Daniel comes in the form of a distant picture of the future, when travel and knowledge will be greatly expanded.
But you, Daniel, keep these words secret, and seal the book until the end times. Many will travel everywhere, and knowledge will grow. Daniel 12:4.
Blue Oasis. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's under Loren Adams, Fayetteville, Arkansas, USA. Or email me at ladams727@aol.com.